So thank you, Dennis and AWS, for giving us the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what we're up to at Real Weld. We've been on the market not quite 2 years, also in the business of providing welding training solutions to manufacturers and to educators. We take a very different approach than what you've just heard. The technology here was originally developed at the Edison Welding Institute, EWI in Columbus, Ohio. So if you're familiar with EWI, that's where this originated. So I'm based in Columbus at the EWI facility. So in the 30 minutes, I'll give you a little bit of a backgrounder and a level set of sort of where we are currently with our product, and then just some of the experiences that our customers and have had, and some of the applications that they are using with our device. And then spend most of the time actually looking forward in the short term of some of the things that we're planning to build, and maybe more interestingly, our vision for the future and where we're headed longer term, and welcome feedback on that. Tell me if you think I'm crazy. Tell me if you think that we're on track with what we're trying to do. So the device works as you actually weld. We've designed the device to go in the lab, in your welding booth. The design point that we focused on is the welding instructor hovered over the shoulder of the trainee. That's the experience that we are trying to automate and make better. You actually heard the audio coach say, "Go faster," right? So the coaching happens in real time as you were welding live, just as if you were hovered over the trainee's shoulder and coaching them along the way. You see the monitor there that's collecting the data in real time on all the same fundamentals of welding technique in terms of angle and speed and contact tip to work distance and things like that. We plug into whatever equipment you have there in the booth. So any brand, make, model of welding equipment is what we adapt to. Stig, MIG, and flux cord processes. You use your existing curriculum, and that curriculum gets configured onto our device. So you don't have to change the way you teach. You don't have to change your curriculum. We want to replicate the way you teach. That is, again, the experience that we're trying to get is the experience of you hovered over their shoulder, and that's obviously involves your curriculum and your teaching technique. I'll show you in a little bit, but we give feedback actually as you're approaching the weld in terms of positioning the torch and your stance during the weld, and then immediately after the weld, providing feedback for that. So fillet, lap, groove, joints, flat, horizontal, vertical, overhead positions are what we are supporting. I love the song "Keeping It Real" by Shaggy. So that's everything that we think about is keeping it real, right? So it's in your existing booth, it's with your existing equipment, it's with your existing curricula, it's with your existing weld procedures. You're wearing a hood, jacket, gloves, you've got a real torch or a real electrode holder. You feel the heat, weight, sound, smell. Everything that we are doing is entirely focused on the real environment that exists. You configure your curriculum in the device the way you teach today. This is what the screen would look like for the student. They've completed the first part of that curriculum. They're in process with lesson number 6, and the instructor has actually chosen to lock them out of lessons 7 through 12 until they've satisfied the objectives of 6. That's an option for the instructor as to whether you want to sort of have a free-for-all and allow people to self-pace through all of them, or whether you want it to be highly structured and serial as you pace through the curriculum. Tolerances, again, the device can capture the technique of a welding instructor, right? So the best practice that we see is the welding instructor takes your curriculum, your welding procedures, right, and welds with the device. Our device captures your specific technique. We would take that captured technique and set the tolerance parameters around that. So again, whether you're physically hovered over their shoulder or whether the student is working on the device, they're getting coaching and instruction on the same technique, right? It's not like there's a disconnect between when you're working with them and then they go to the machine. And similarly, those tolerances can be set up to be lenient if you're in the beginning and be narrowed down if you're driving for Skills USA or exam prep or whatever that would be. So when you approach the machine, there's a welding procedure that is presented on the screen that you have to internalize, right? So you read the procedure and review all the instructions with that. We can support that with rich media, and I'll show you another screen example of that in just a bit. So we're coming out with a way of being able to incorporate rich media attached to the welding procedure. When I'm getting myself positioned, I get a visual indicator up on the screen, but I get audio coaching as I'm preparing to get into the proper position. As I weld, also, there's a visual on the screen for the onlookers and the instructor, and audio and coaching for the trainee. As I'm welding live, again, there's visuals up on the screen for onlookers or the instructor, and audio coaching for the trainee. And then after the fact, a composite numerical score for every weld, 0 to 100, right? Averages around where your technique fell, and then a visual analysis of each of the technique parameters, and when you were inbounds and when you were out of bounds for each one of the 5 techniques that we're actually tracking.
I see you. Angle up. Angle left. Learn to run.
So when you approach the coupon, right, you heard her say, "I see you," right? So she's detecting that you're getting ready to weld, right? She said angle left. Can't remember. Up? Was it up? Thanks. All right. She said angle up. So she's, again, it's just as if you're hovered over your trainee's shoulder and you're trying to give them coaching on proper position and stance. We're trying to automate that same thing. When she says burn to learn, right, that's our tag, and that means you're good to go, right? And so burn to learn is the cue that says everything is lined up, and hit the trigger, and that same audio coaching would continue, right, seamlessly as I'm welding live. So the coaching begins when you're in set, when you're positioning in your stance, and then it continues right through as you're welding live.
Go faster.
She says things like go faster and go slower and all of that. So the audio has been a huge improvement for us. The audio coaching that we have put in largely was driven by our early adopter customers, and just from observing. It's very context specific. She doesn't tell you what you're doing wrong. She tells you exactly what the corrective action that you need to perform. And it's customizable. If you don't like her voice, her name is Allie. I think she's a cousin of Siri, right? And if you don't like her voice, right, you can actually record your own voice. So your trainees not only get trained on your technique, but they could hear your voice coming through on the actual device. And, you know, we've heard others talk about it, but there's a requirement to make learning fun and engaging and get people excited about coming to school and learning this. And this is the kind of technology that is just can suck those students in and really get them quite engaged around things. So lots of discussion happens around the screen, and again, a score 0 to 100 on after every weld that's performed. I'll say this: it's possible to weld a beautiful weld on our device and score poorly, okay? Because we're not evaluating the quality of the weld. What we're evaluating is your ability to weld in the technique that is being asked for, right? And obviously those things ought to be correlated, right? But we have lots of people who come up and just want to weld, right? And prove that they're a great welder, right? That's not the objective of our device. The objective of the device is, what kind of versatility do you have amongst your technique, right? Are you an old dog without new tricks? Or do you can you internalize what a weld procedure says and actually make the adjustments in your muscle and in your technique to be able to do that? Couple of best practices that we see some things going on with our customers. So on the material, right? So everything that you saw so far in the video clips with the arc on actually works exactly the same way with the arc off. That is, you can practice manual motions with the arc off, so you're minimizing the use of material in the very beginning, right? So you can take those practice runs, imprint that technique, feel what it's like to go 7 inches a minute as opposed to blazing fast, right? That's hard for people to internalize in the very beginning. So there's certainly a conservation of material that comes with the device. There's probably a bigger cost savings that comes from eliminating the amount of material that's wasted from students unknowingly practicing wrong in the booth. That is, they're in the booth, they're working hard, they think they're performing as you had just instructed, and in actual fact, they've digressed into whatever their natural habits are, right? And so again, if you can give that feedback more immediately, there's a lot of material savings that's possible. We've got the other thing that's really been interesting to watch some of our students and the range, or customers rather, is the range of students that the device has been used for. On your left, this gal is Bree. We were at Des Moines Area Community College, first semester student. They started on stick. She had never picked up a MIG gun. We set up to show them the device that day. We're set up on a MIG process. 15 students. Who wants to go first? She raises her hand. Never had a MIG gun in her hand before. She really focused in on the device, right? Laid down a 58 score on her first time ever holding a MIG gun. Turned around to the rest of her class and said, "Eat that," right? So, and you can just see the expression on her face, right, of saying, "Eat that" to the rest of her classmates. So the competitiveness that comes out of this is really just quite amazing to watch. The other thing that's really great is so for really honing in on skills. So this was a group just a couple of weeks ago before the Skills Ohio competition, and instructor and student going through a variety of different techniques before actually competing in the competition. We have About half of our customers have actually taken our device and put them into one of their existing booths, and about the other half has actually taken the device and put it in a net new sort of real weld training demo space, right? And not occupied one of their existing booths. That is, they fundamentally see this as a different tool, and they just didn't want to disrupt their normal flow. Hey, I've got 20 booths in my brain, and this is how I use the 20 booths. And so even though we designed it strictly to go in a booth, what we're actually finding is half of our customers have set it up, basically build a special real weld area or booth for it. One of the things that people are doing with that, similar as we saw with Ivy, is you can Bluetooth a screen next to our monitor, blow that up quite big, and be able to see the screen device across to a wider audience. The other value that gets is if you're in an existing booth with the curtains drawn, you as an instructor, right, unless you're in the booth with them, you can't really see what's going on. And you can go into the booth and you can hit a button and you can see their history and basically see what they're, whether they're posting zeros or hundreds as they're in that. But we're seeing people want to put a big screen up above, right? So they're in an enclosed space, but the instructor can just sort of at a glance, right, see what kind of performance is going on in the booth without actually having to stop what they're doing. The other thing that's quite evident is when you know that your scores are on display for your instructor and all your mates to see, suddenly you're paying a lot more attention while you're in the booth practicing. We see people. People doing things with scores and leaderboards and sort of doing that in a makeshift kind of way now, and that's something that we think is pretty interesting down the road for us to be able to do more with. On the left, and Sam was at Northland Pioneer College in Show Low last summer, and a group of welding instructors, and just spontaneously, somehow they decided they wanted to do an ambidextrous smackdown competition, right? You can just you hit a device and say, I want to go right-handed, or you hit a button and you say, I want to go left-handed. And so they actually did a competition that says, okay, you got to weld in both hands, and they took the composite score. And of course, Wes, who was a lefty, crushed everybody, just crushed everybody. I think he had, 30 years of discrimination against left-handers, and he was really in his element. He was quite in his element that day. The photo on the right, it's really interesting to watch welding instructors challenge their students to score better than they do, right? That's an interesting dynamic for us to watch. Not all welding instructors are comfortable enough in their skin to be able to challenge their students in that way, but it's really powerful when we see that. And again, it's an amazing motivator for the students to be able to, in your face, back to their instructor, I beat your score. There are revenue opportunities associated with the device. Most of our customers are either as part of core curriculum or as extra. They're taking the screening test and the welding procedures of area employers, putting them on the device so that their trainees are actually welding on those screening tests and procedures as they're still in school. So when those graduates show up for hire, they've already been working on the specific tests. They already have feedback. They haven't developed bad habits. That the school and the area employer can really work together on in a synergistic kind of way, and produce graduates that are far more job ready than possible. We include everything in the welding procedures, so more than what we just care about. We assume your primary teaching vehicle is the welding procedure, so we try to open that up as much as we possibly can. Almost every place we go where we think we find whether it's a manufacturer or a school, right, we find variation in technique on the same welding procedure, right? So without a device like this, right, there really hasn't been so possible to be able to catch that kind of a variation in technique. And so it's been, whether it's various instructors or classes or time periods or whatever, you can drive consistency in your program as a result of this. So some of the things that we're building right now. So today our curricula are a set of welding procedures, right? So you define a curriculum, and that curriculum is basically a set of welding procedures. So we're expanding the definition of our curricula to be broader learning objectives, right? And those learning objectives could be around safety, they could be around equipment usage, it could be other kinds of things, and those can be supported with rich media objects in addition to everything that we currently have with welding procedures. Also, the welding procedures can be supported and augmented with rich media as well. So we're incorporating that into that, whether that rich media is living locally on the device, whether it's living on your local area network, whether it's in Blackboard or Moodle or whatever your content management system is, or whether it's out in YouTube, doesn't matter to us. As long as it's a legitimate path name, we can follow it and play it. The other thing that we're doing is we're going to pre-package curriculum options from various providers. So for example, yesterday, David, you mentioned about Iowa getting on board with having a uniform set of naming. Why should our customers have to reinvent that every time, right? So I would love to have an Iowa packaged curriculum, and just even if it's just naming and courseware, right? You know, so that it's that is just no reason for people to have to recreate that kind of work. So whether it would be AWS sense-based curriculum, any kind of curriculum, we're interested in sort of offering pre-packaged options. You would license your curriculum however you would today. This would be just an alternative delivery format that you would be using that curriculum around. We are developing pipe welding right now. We've passed all of our technical feasibility for supporting pipe, so we'll be coming out with that by the year end. Again, mostly we expect most of that to be around SMAW, 5G, and 6G, and multi-segmented. That is, you burn out the rod and to be able to pick up where you left off and continue around the pipe and have that as one experience in terms of the overall weld. And now some more stuff further into the future. We've certainly heard and talked about challenges that exist around training, and that's really why we're all here. And there's quantity challenges and there's quality challenges and lots of things that we're all trying to do to make a difference there. But there's certainly availability of technology that can be integrated together and to be able to improve or offer additional education opportunities to people today that maybe don't have the opportunity to do so. So we think there's an interesting intersection of technology between what we're already doing in terms of our current product, web camera, welding camera, which we saw an example of yesterday, and distance learning technology. and basically put that in what we're calling a welding iBooth or a welding kiosk, right? Where the welding instructor, right, is delivered over the internet, right? So one of the fundamental challenges that exist is not only the number of students wanting to take up the craft of welding, but if we actually solve that problem, I'm not convinced that we have enough welding instructors to go around to teach those students, right? So one of the things that we think is could make a really material impact on this problem is to be able to offer high schools that don't currently teach welding, right, sort of the return of shop, as was referenced yesterday. So if you had a welding kiosk, right, you would still need somebody there for safety and supervision and operation of the equipment. They wouldn't have to be a welding instructor. They don't have to know all the stuff that you know, right? You could weld in, you could use the device, right, on a self-paced base, and if you need help, you'd hit a button, and I don't know how many people use Uber on their phone, right? How many people know the Uber experience? Not many, okay? Hit a button, you get a map and a push pin. Here's some welding instructors that are online right now and available to help you, right? Dial it up, you'd see their face, like in a FaceTime or a Google Hangout kind of an experience. If you can make eye contact, if you can make ear contact and hear, the instructor can hear the weld, right? If you can get their technique, which we're providing, if you can see a close-up of the puddle as it's being welded, like what we were shown yesterday from Ivy, and if you can do a visual inspection of the bead after the fact, right? I think that's the fundamentals that we could take a long way. And I think the objective here isn't necessarily to teach welding, at least at the high school level. The objective would be, can I have a meaningful experience around welding in high school instead of driving 60 minutes across town to where the only option is for me currently, and maybe there's a set of students then that come to your community college and excited about welding and haven't been exposed to welding, where otherwise they might not have been. And they took it far enough to actually understand what it was about. Do they like it? Do they have some natural talent for it? So we think that's a really interesting new product development for us that we're very excited about, and would love to hear feedback from folks on that. The other thing that we're really committed and interested in is in the world of portable, stackable, and digital credentials, right? So everything that's going on around credentialing today, right, inevitably has to go digital, right? So it's the same credentialing, right? But if those credentials become digital, they become a lot more interesting to a lot more people, right? So this is all based on an open standard from the Mozilla Foundation called Open Badges. It has great support from the Manufacturing Institute. And we have built a prototype on this already. And so we know we can do everything we need to do to be able to support you in issuing digital credentials using our data as part of the evidence package that would be associated with that particular credential, right? So the idea here is you would define these badges, as they're called, right? Digital badges. You have full control over the semantics and the branding of those badges, whether that would be AWS or your college or labor union, whoever it would be. We want to be the de facto evidence provider in those badges, right? That is documenting levels of training and acquired proficiency. Badge earners will work over their entire careers and gain experience formally in class and maybe more so on the job. And over time, those badge earners then carry around a digital resume of their acquired skills and proficiencies. So think LinkedIn, but much more oriented around trades, skills, and things like that. So this is a longer-term direction for us. We think it's vital to move in this direction. AWS is excited about this direction as well. right? And again, we're not interested in being a credentialer ourselves other than to illustrate how that could be done. What we're interested in is making it really easy to take the wealth of data we're starting to accumulate and make that a part of the credentials that people would be issuing. So, and there's my 30-minute timer. How about that? So, last slide, perfect. We just think about the Shaggy's song, "Keeping It Real." That's what we're all about, right? Is focusing on the real world experience, bringing technology into the fold to create a better learning environment and experiences. We've got some near-term plans that we're going to be rolling out in 2014, and would love to have your feedback on some of the more ambitious, longer-term plans that we have in store. Thank you very much.